Cyber Operations and Risk Management Briefing from Group 4, New Zealand. Introduction. This presentation is to provide leadership with an understanding of software options for New Zealand during the summit. Topics include explanation of New Zealand's needs, overview of software development lifecycle, overview of supply risk management, vulnerabilities, and recommendations for New Zealand. Software assurance. Software assurance is the level of confidence that software is free from vulnerabilities and that the software functions are intended by the user. It is important for New Zealand to consider software assurance so that all vulnerabilities are known and patched, and so security requirements for the application are present. It is also important to make sure the software is relevant to the summit and that New Zealand officials are aware of the software development lifecycle and supply chain management, and how that all relates back to New Zealand's presence during the summit. Software development lifecycle. The software development lifecycle defines the steps needed to develop and maintain software through its usefulness. There are 6 steps in this process: planning, analysis, design, implementation, testing and integration, and maintenance. During the planning and analysis phases is when the security, functionality, and performance requirements are established. The design phase includes creating the interface through coding via programming languages. The requirements established during the planning phase are executed and checked for satisfaction during the implementation and testing phases. Finally, the maintenance phase includes updating and patching regularly so the software continues to meet all requirements. While software functionality and performance are important, security analysis and testing is a critical component of the software development lifecycle and should be considered through every phase due to the potential cyber attack risks that can lead to data and integrity loss. Supply chain risk. Supply chain risk management is the process by which risks associated with the acquisition and provisioning of components, such as hardware, software, and infrastructure, are regularly reviewed and addressed. Because organizations depend on third-party vendors and/or open-source libraries for software applications, reviewing and addressing these concerns helps to minimize the impact of risk to business operations and data security. There are 2 elements of modern software that can be applied to New Zealand for use at the summit: imported software and off-the-shelf software. Imported software is drawn from open source libraries and frameworks. While this software is easily customizable to meet the organization's needs, it can increase security vulnerabilities, causing supply chain attacks, such as embedded malicious code packages or remote code execution. Licensing complications and malicious packages are also potential issues that can negatively impact the supply chain. Off-the-shelf software is acquired from third parties. While convenient and easy to install and implement, organizations have little insight to the back-end security measurements of the application, potentially leading to non-secure or undersecure data. Considering a supply chain risk management strategy will help New Zealand ensure the security and integrity of data, regardless of the software application chosen. Vulnerabilities. There are several vulnerabilities to consider regarding software. Lack of a lifecycle management plan will lead to loss of opportunity, business failure, and unanticipated costs for the organization. When the organization fails to consider all aspects of the software development lifecycle, there will be elements missed that will result in having to put out more money to fix an issue, rather than considering that issue ahead of time and preparing accordingly. Lack of maintenance refers to maintaining all aspects of the software, including security policies, functionality, performance requirements, lifecycle and supply chain management plans, updates, and patches. If all aspects are not maintained properly, the software will not be effective, thus putting the organization at risk for attacks and data extraction. Inventory management is also an important element to consider and can become a vulnerability if not accounted for. Lack of inventory of systems, servers, databases, and network devices increase the information systems threat. Some of these threats include IP address spoofing, denial of service attacks, session hijacking attacks, and distributed denial of service attacks. It is also always important to consider human error because behind every computer is a human that is liable to make a mistake. While this vulnerability is inevitable, making sure employees are properly trained and equipped with correct information will help in managing these mistakes. Commercial software. Commercial software is proprietary software that is distributed for a fee and is recommended for New Zealand. With non-free licensing, the customer pays an initial charge for the software and an additional charge annually for support. The software vendor takes care of quality control, as well as of further maintenance, upgrades, and tech support. The company selling the software is expected to provide timely patches, bug fixes, and updates. Using a third-party vendor can be a benefit because they are responsible for supporting technical issues, licensing requirements, and security, leaving the organization to invest their time elsewhere. However, since proprietary code is used, the organization is unable to customize the source code for company needs. Any additional functionality will come at a higher price. Another potential downfall are the strict licensing guidelines that vendors must follow, thus the company having to put out funding for licensing that may or may not be used. While it is better to have more licensing for auditing purposes, over-licensing is essentially throwing money down the drain and not beneficial for business operations. To avoid licensing waste, it is imperative New Zealand set goals and expectations as to what is needed for business. This way, the correct commercial software can be utilized, resulting in little to no licensing or funding waste. It is also important for New Zealand to find a commercial software that aligns with the security needs of the organization, since proprietary source code cannot be edited. Creating and implementing a plan prior to investing in commercial software will help reduce the impact of the downfalls that come with it. Recommendations. The following recommendations should be considered for New Zealand during the summit. Implementing commercial software should be considered as a software option for New Zealand. The benefit of high-level security, frequent updates and patches, and low maintenance for New Zealand far outweigh the higher cost. Allowing a third party to have significant control over the software security could be considered a risk. However, this can easily be addressed through an application security contract. Comparably, off-the-shelf software framework is the recommended supply chain operation. Off-the-shelf software is convenient and easy to install and implement. Due to the already established security efforts of the vendor, New Zealand would not have to spend significant time on testing security measures. There would already be an established framework in place. The application security contract would also apply to the supply chain operation, which would address any security concerns for New Zealand that was not already covered by the vendor. While the cost is significantly higher than if open source software were used, the infrastructure is much more secure with the commercial and third-party software, making it worth the investment. The application security contract with third-party vendors is important to consider because all the vulnerabilities in the vendor's security directly impacts the organization. So it's important to clearly define what security requirements are essential to meet the needs of the organization and uphold industry security standards. Adding language that ensures the software and security is built according to a product requirements document is recommended, along with including acceptance testing criteria specific to security to protect the organization against software not written in accordance with requirements. Including a vulnerability service level agreement is also recommended. This can be structured into vulnerability severity tiers and include classifications or examples of vulnerability severity level and response and resolution time in case a security breach arises. Overall, it is important for both the organization and vendor to understand where each party stands and what to expect in the event of a cyber attack or security breach. Considering and implementing these recommendations will ensure New Zealand has secure software and successful contribution during the summit.